Okay, in this video I want to introduce the conditional operator. Now, this one might seem a bit weird at first. It's similar to an if-else statement, but we use this conditional operator, which is a question mark and a colon. And it's a ternary operator, so we have three operands. So you can see here we have some Boolean expression, and that is typically in parentheses, unless that is simply a single variable, maybe such as a Boolean. And then you have a question mark and some expression, the colon, and then another expression. Now those expressions can also often be between parentheses. If that Boolean expression is true, then expression 1 evaluates. So whatever that expression is will evaluate, and then the result of that expression will be returned. But if that Boolean expression is false, then that second expression, so expression 2 after the colon, will evaluate, and the result of that again is returned. So what do we mean by returned here? Well, since again you might not be super familiar with a function, remember that I mentioned that a function can return something. So in other words, it can calculate something and then return the result. So this is kind of similar. So one of these expressions will evaluate based on the Boolean expression, and then the result of that expression will be returned. And then we can store that result in a variable, for example, or we can print it out, or whatever the case might be. Okay, so how do we remember this stuff? Again, at first it might seem a bit weird, but you can think of it in this way. You can think of it as an if-else statement. That first Boolean expression you can think of as similar to the expression that goes into the if statement. So if that first expression is true, then execute whatever comes right after the question mark, else execute that expression that comes after the colon. So in the if-else statement, the else comes last. So the same thing happens here. Else is that final expression, so after the colon. So maybe that kind of helps you to remember which one will execute, basically. Okay, in this example I'll do 3 integers. Then I'll also do something where we can return a result or some calculation into. So I'll just do result. And I'll just initialize result here to 0. So x is 6, y is 0, and result is also 0. So we can actually use the conditional operator to set the result variable. So I'll just do in parentheses here, I'll write is greater than y, and then based on that we return x, for example, or we return y. So again, if x is greater than y, which it is in this case, then we will return x, otherwise we will return y. So let's just do a cout with the result, and I'll build and run that, and you can see 6. And if we set y to 8, for example, then that will return y instead. It's going to look at this, okay, and that will evaluate to false. So it's going to jump to the else part, basically. So following this colon, so it's going to return, in this case, y. Now, these might be expressions, so you can have something between parentheses, you can write out some mathematical expression or whatever the case might be, and it's going to calculate that and then return that. But in this case, we're just keeping it simple. Okay, so I'll build and run that, and you can see we get 8. I'll just set that to 0 again. We can also use the conditional operator to check for division by 0. So of course we don't want to divide by 0. So let's say here, so if y is not equal to 0, so we can divide, in that case, by y. Otherwise, we return 0. Okay, so let's just check this out again. We want to check here. So if y is not equal to 0, then we can do this. So then we can do x divided by y. Otherwise, it will return 0. So in this case, it should return 0, okay, when we print this out, because y is currently 0. Let's just build and run that. You can see 0. And let's set y maybe to 3 there. Okay, build and run, and you can see that calculates and we don't get any problems. Okay, so this is one way of using this conditional operator to check for division by 0. Of course, there are many use cases. This is just one example. So we'll look at one more quick example before ending off this video. Okay, in this quick demo, I have a health variable, an integer variable, and that is set to 13. And I do a console output based on whether my health is greater than 0. So if it is greater than 0, I have this string literal that I print out to the console, still in the game. So if this is false, then we will return whatever is after the colon, in this case this string literal, which reads game over. So currently it's set to 13. I'll just run this, build and run, and you can see still in the game. And of course, if I change that to 0 and I build and run, you can see game over. Okay, because this will evaluate to false. So it will go to this part here after the colon, going to return this, which will print out then to the console. So of course you can go and write an if else statement. You can do if, and then this between the parentheses, and then you can do the cout and print this, and in the else part you can do this. All right, but as you can see, this is a faster way of doing that in a single line, and it's quite readable as well. It's not that difficult to follow. The main thing you have to recognize is these characters basically. Okay, and then you'll realize, okay, this is the conditional operator, which has these operands. This first one, which is basically the boolean, and then you have this part here, where again, if that's true, this will return, else this part will calculate and return. It's not that difficult, it's a bit weird at first, but once you've used it a few times, you'll realize, in some cases it's really useful, because instead of having to write a long if else statement, I can just do it in one line here. Okay, so I hope this video was useful to you, and I'll see you next time.